Greetings, everybody. For anyone who actually was here when this presentation was originally scheduled, please forgive me. You know from experience, you've seen my other presentations, they all start on time. This was an emergency, circumstances beyond my control. But you know what's so great about Riff is that he is so short and concise. We're going to do a whole daf and riff in almost no time whatsoever. You're getting a head start on the daf. We're even gonna push ahead of the daf yomi with riff because he's so concise. So let me explain just a couple of minutes of introduction about what the riff is about, um, and why there's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. The riff you know, is indeed the Talmud for the time of when we don't have a temple. That sadly not all the mitzvahs apply. So the Rif took on handling the mitzvahs that do apply, but by bringing collating, and summarizing the Talmud as it pertains to the mitzvahs that apply in our day and age. But he left out the opinions that we don't like, and he left out the extra argumentation. So let me give a brief introduction to this. The way the Rambam himself explains this in a letter, in more than one letter, one to Rav Pinchas Adai, another one to his student. The same seems to me it's the same student that the Morning Nevuchim was addressed to, who subsequently moved to Baghdad. Right, the Talmud has three elements to it. Right, element number one is to research the origins of the halachas that are published, in the Mishnah. What is the reason for them? How were they derived in the first place? That's function number one. Function number two is to now compare and contrast the precedent to new cases that arise, to now make new rulings based on the precedents. That's another thing that the Talmud does. Right? And we have to engage in these mental processes, researching the origins of halacha and doing our best to figure out what the halacha would be in such and such a case. Go through these processes to the best of our ability. It's one of our obligations of Talmud Torah, in addition to going through the entirety of published law, which is the function of Rambam's Mishnah Torah. It's the new Mishnah. Right? So now there's a third thing that the Talmud does, which what makes the Talmud so voluminous, and really could be frustrating to people who don't have patience for it. And that is that the Talmud now has also argumentation. Lots of argument between either two different people who had two different opinions, or the Talmud raises seeming contradictions, right? And then it argues out what the correct resolution of the contradiction is, or it will disqualify a particular opinion as being erroneous, or disqualify a particular brisa as having been distorted. Whoever wrote it down distorted it. So now that function of that argumentation to weed out opinions that are not accepted as final rulings, or to resolve conflicts, or to weed out any mistakes that may have crept in. We have a distorted brisa or a distorted saying, right? That function of Talmud is not the essence of Talmud, I'm quoting from the Rambam. That is not the essence of the Talmud. Right? The Talmud did that out of necessity. The Talmud had to prove itself, to show that it's authoritative. So to make a case for itself, it had to prove why the opinions that it doesn't rule like ought to be rejected. Talmud, had to deal with doubts that arose, or corrupted brises that made it into our Masorah, to weed them out or realign them. right? But these things only, this aspect of the Talmud is only necessary when problems arise or when you have to make a case for yourself. But if you know the correct rulings, right, like you take all the correct conclusions of the Talmud, which is what the Rif did. He took all the correct conclusions, I should say, all the final, I meant to say, all the final conclusions of the Talmud regarding all the mitzvahs that apply in this day and age. Yeah, and he also did it in the order of the Talmud. He collated all the, but he didn't just collate. He took that correct conclusion, the source of that conclusion, or what that conclusion was based on. So we're just reading the whole dialectic surrounding the buildup for the correct, procedure that the Talmud says is the way to go. That is the correct way to understand, or that is the correct way to do the mitzvah. That is the correct halacha. So he weeded out all the extra argumentation that is not the essence of the Talmud, but is just Talmud did out of necessity, because the Talmud had to make a case for itself. So it had to also explain why other opinions are wrong, right, or cannot be relied on, or explain that these certain brises have to be read differently, or realigned. But all that argumentation is only out of necessity, should the necessity arise. But the essence of Talmud is to know the origins of the halacha and to take the correct precedents that and make the necessary applications. And that's the aspect of which is the essence of the Talmud. That's what the Rif took, and the Rambam is very assertive that one could fulfill his obligation of learning Talmud with the Rif. At least vis-a-vis what the Rif wrote on. The Rambam would readily admit we have to go back to the Talmud for what the Rif didn't write on, because the Rif only wrote on. He extracted from the Talmud the correct conclusions, the correct opinions, right? The correct streams of thought, I should say, from the beginning of its origin, from the pasuk, right, all the way down to the final compare and contrast that the Talmud does. The correct streams of thinking were collated vis-a-vis only what applies in this day and age, right? But the mitzvahs have to do with, Eretz Yisrael, like much of Zroim, and Kachim, Taurus, that a lot of these things only apply when the base Midrash is standing. All right, so for that, we have to go back to the Talmud. But you know what? In the most recent times, talking about the Siyum of Daf Hayomi today, right? In his day, the Chafetz Chaim, right? A contemporary of Meir Shapiro of Lublin. He was much older than him, but I think he also outlived him also. The Chafetz Chaim, he wrote Rif. He wrote Likutei Halachos, which is Rif, on all the things the Rif didn't write on. Because, the Chafetz Chaim was very anxious that we should learn the laws of the sacrifices. Aside from the fact that he himself was a Kohen, and he couldn't wait to getting for the base which we built so he could offer sacrifices. He believed that our studying these laws would show God that we really want the Beis Hamikdash to be rebuilt, and it will hasten the coming of the Mashiach and the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash. So he wrote Rif on all those topics that the Rif didn't write on, all the Kachim and Taurus. And with Bli Neder on this great YouTube channel, you should just subscribe to this great channel. It is the full benefits of a full yeshiva education. We have everything on this channel. We've got Rif, we've got Lumdus, we've got Halacha, we've got Musar, we've got Ashkafa. Right? Just browse the channel and see Derech Hashem, Mar Nevuchim, Kuzari, right? Lumdus, right? Sefer HaMitzvos of the Rambam, Mishnah Torah of the Rambam, Pirush HaMishnayos of the Rambam, Mishnah with the Pirush HaMishnayos, Rif, right? And much, much, much more. Right, so with Bli Neder, when we finish Rif, we will start doing Likutei Halachos of the Chafetz Chaim. Like I said, in the Sefer Menucha Kedusha from the Talmud of Chaim Lozner, he says, listen, Gemara is like so many details, especially as it goes into that extra added argumentation that it went to by pure necessity, right? Which you don't really need to. So how much of the Daf Gemara do I really need to remember? That's called that I got it. I got the thing that I must retain from the Gemara, that I absolutely must retain. Riff, but he recommends doing the Riff and the Rush. The Rush is the exact same style as the Riff, except that he rules differently sometimes in accordance with the Ashkenazic tradition. Right, so he's do Riff and Rush. And anyone here, if you do the Riff, you go through the Rush like a hot knife through butter. He generally, it's almost the Riff verbatim, but then he explains, he adds where the Ashkenazim, in his tradition, would rule differently. Right? So Riff and Rush is the amount of material you have to take away from the Gemara. If you don't take away less than that, you missed it. You missed it, because the main objective of the Gemara is to come to the correct conclusion and of course, research the origins of that opinion. The Riff and Rush, the correct, they distill the correct, the accepted stream of thought, with, knowing its origins and with, the whole stream of thought, the precedent and the applications. So you have nothing to feel guilty about. Are we starting a new cycle of Daf Yomi? No, busha to do it with the Riff. And with the Riff, it's one could say, Daf Yomi, if you have time for it, you have time for it. But that time for it means not just to hear it, said to you rapid fire in 20 minutes to half an hour and no review. If you have time to do it thoroughly in an hour-long share and then review it, fine. I'm not trying to discourage you, but if you're just not getting it because it's too much said in a very compact amount of time, and with that much material, there's no time to review it, I say you're better off doing Riff. The Rambam says you're better off doing Riff. Rambam was critical of people that get, sidetracked by the side argumentation that arose purely by necessity. And Rambam says people are losing their focus, what the Talmud really wanted. They should stick to Riff where there is Riff. And you'll see this is so easy to learn. If it'll take us 20 minutes to get through a daf, and one daf of Riff could be sometimes like many dafim in the Gemara, depending on what the sugya was, how many other possibilities the Gemara had to eliminate, right? So, so we will be making great time. We'll even be running ahead of Daf Yomi, and 20 minutes is not saying an hour long of information in 20 minutes. 20 minutes is the right amount of time to cover the information on a Daf of Riff, with plenty of time to absorb it. And since it's all of 20 minutes and it's really only 20 minutes of material, you should be able to find time to review it, either daily or just at the end of the week, right? Now, we're not going to do a daf of Riff every day. We're going to do it 5 days a week, but 5 dafim of Riff a week in the Riff is going to have us still flying way ahead of Daf Yomi. And, for Brachos and we're set for quite a while to go. Like I said, we will, at the right time, incorporate from the Likutei Halachos of the Chafetz Chaim, to get a Riff style, a Riff type version of the laws that the Riff may have skipped because they don't apply during the time of the Golus. Without further ado, right? Memasai Karshma Barvin, the Mishnah opens up first Mishnah in Shas. From when do we reach at Marav at night? From the time that the Kohanim enter to eat their truma until the end of the first third of the night, literally the first guarding of the night, because as the Gemara explains, there's a shift of the guards in the heavenly assembly, every third of the night. Right, so according to Rabbi Lezer, you start reading it from the time Kohanim go to eat their truma, and they eat their truma after nightfall. Meaning, if they were impure and they went to the mikveh, they still have to wait for nightfall to be able to eat truma, as is well known, right? But that's when it starts at nightfall. When it goes, watch if you see the Kohanim going to eat truma, you could say Shema of the night. And you have until the third of the night, and that's where it ends. Meaning if you missed it and you didn't say it by that time, you missed out on the time of the mitzvah because there's different. The sheet of Rabbi Eliezer that holds that b'shach b'chol, when Torah says read Kriyat Shema when you go to sleep, it says people go to sleep, but from nightfall until 1/3 into the night. After people are asleep, they don't go into sleep. I already asleep. That's his understanding, right? We don't rule that way, as the Rif will tell us, right? But that's his understanding. So it starts at when the Kohanim go to eat their truma, which is nightfall, when 3 stars come out. And it ends according to Rabbi Eliezer. You missed the mitzvah if you didn't say Kriyat within the first 3rd night. But our sages say ad chatzos, you have until midnight, till halfway through the night. The says you have until dawn, till daybreak. All right, so a lot of this will be qualified by the Rif, which the Rif quoting from the Gemara. Tanu Rabbana, so we learned in the Tosefta. Right? So the Tosefta says, from when do people start reading Shema at night? So Rabbi Meir holds that it's from the time that people go to eat on Erev Shabbos, right? That means people used to accept Shabbos early, right? And like we do in the summer months in many communities, when Shabbos comes inside, we accept Shabbos was still outside. So they davened already while there was a little bit of light in, to see by, but by the time they go to start their meal, that's the time when they can already say Shema, right? So, and that's still earlier than full-fledged nightfall, because they daven early, and then they, and then they go into, they start their meal. It's before nightfall, and then Chachamim disagree with Rabbi Meir and say from the time that the Kohanim are worthy to eat their truma. Similar davar, you want to know what what that signifies? Kohanim, ready to eat their truma. Tzeisa Kohanim, when the stars come out. Now, even though this cannot be proved concretely, because after all, the Torah just said when you go to sleep and when you get up. Now we know you sleep at night, right? So how do we know night starts with the stars coming out? So even though we don't have a clear raya, clear proof from a black and white verse, but nonetheless, we could synthesize 2 psukim in Nehemiah that give us that message. He says, that they're working on Rachsi Melacha V'chitzim, U'machzikim Barmachim El Shara. We were busy with work, and we're busy with our arrows and holding our spears from Alos Shach, from dawn ad Tzeisa Kochavim, until the stars came out. That's one pasuk. V'omer, and the pasuk, Nehemiah first says, V'anu alayla mishmar v'yom melacha. We guarded all night and we worked all day, right? So he says they're busy so we synthesize these 2 psukim together, right? And say, hey, we're busy working from dawn until the stars came out, right? And another pasuk says, we were busy with work all day long. Hey, that means that, the day is from dawn until the stars come out, because he said before we were busy with work from dawn until the stars came out. Another part says, and we worked all day. Right? So you see that the day ends at when the stars come out. So that's called nightfall, and that's called the time when a person ought to go to sleep. That's nighttime. Right? So now the Rif is now talking himself. Shamin and Hashta. So now we hear now for the Bein L'Masir, whether it be our Mishnah that we open, Bein L'Brais, which is his Tosefta, that said in the name of Chachamim, that it starts from the time Kohanim go to eat their truma, which is Tzeisa Kocham, which is when the stars come out, that both the Mishnah and the Brisa agreed that Onas Krishma Rabban Mishash Shakon Chasach Tumasan, that the time of Krishma, according to the majority opinion of rabbis, the Chachamim, the sages, is from the time the Kohanim go to eat their truma, which is when the stars come out. And this is the halacha, right? This is the final real ruling. Why? And the Rif explains why. The kind, so even though the Gemara didn't explain this black and white, because Gemara expects you to have this background information, so it's another benefit of the Rif. He's not just shortening the Gemara, he also explains the Gemara and fills in the blanks. It's a great book. Right, this is the halacha. Why is this halacha? The timeline, because we know we have an established principle. Yachid v'rabim halacha karabim. If you have a one against the many, a dispute between the single rabbi and many rabbis, the halacha is like the many, right? By the action, now that which we find in the Talmud, that the Gemara asked a contradiction, Rabbi Lezer, because our Mishnah, the beginning of the Mishnah sounds like it's Rabbi Eliezer, right? Because it says, Mishnah said according to everybody, right? The obligation to say Shema begins when the Kohanim go in to eat their truma, which is when the stars come out. And then Rabbi Eliezer just said, a condition, but you only have until 1:3 of the night. But it sounds like Rabbi Eliezer agrees, and that's when it starts. The obligation starts when the stars come out. And the Gemara asks a contradiction that Rabbi Eliezer said differently elsewhere. The Tanya, as we learned in the Bryce, the Rabbi Eliezer. And so the Gemara asked a contradiction, that there is a Brisa where Rabbi Eliezer was quoted as saying that the obligation to start saying the Shema of night is from the time that people now have to sanctify, Shabbos Friday night. We already cease to do any type of malacha, any type of prohibited activity, any activity that's prohibited on Shabbos. We cease already from sunset. So the period post sunset, before the stars come out, is called Bein HaShmoshes, literally between the two suns, because there's the sun that's setting and there's the sun that's going to rise tomorrow. It's called between the suns. All right, I'm not going to go into the whole depth of what that expression means, but so Rabbi Eliezer said, from the time that we have to already abstain from malacha, right? We have to treat Friday evening with sanctity. For that, so already from that time you could say the Shema of night, which is that's at sunset, immediately following sunset. So that's way earlier than when the stars come out. Now the time period between sunset and when the stars come out varies from region to region. By the equator, or like in land of Israel that's close to the equator, it goes very quickly. From the time that the sun sets and it's totally dark outside. But like where we live in North America, especially in Northern Europe, it could be like 45 minutes, 45, anywhere between 45 minutes and 72 minutes, mamish like Rabbeinu Tam, depending on where you live. All right, but Rabbi Eliezer said over there in the Brisa, for the time you have to abstain from malacha on Friday night. From that time you can start saying Shema. So the Gemara, viewed that as a contradiction. Rabbi Eliezer against Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah, which means what's bothering the Rif, right? That means that the opinion of when the Kohanim go to eat their truma is only according to Rabbi Eliezer. So maybe it's not really the multitude opinion; it's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who seemingly contradicts what he wrote elsewhere, what was said in his name elsewhere in the Brisa. So what's bothering the Rif is that which we said. You start saying Shema night from the time the Kohanim go to eat the truma, which is when it starts out. I would say that's what the majority holds. From the Gemara, it seems that's what Rabbi Eliezer holds, and Rabbi Eliezer, and of course Gemara asked it as a contradiction. Rabbi Eliezer onto Rabbi Eliezer, the Rabbi Eliezer quoted in the Brisa, right? So Dolo for good Rabban the Rebbe Lezer El Ba'atsof. Those of Atsof Ashmur Rishona, run Sabri Ad Chatzos. Al Bishosh Akon across the Lechob Chubasan, Lo Pligi. The Lo Sfir Rabbanim Mishash Kon across the Lechob Chubasan, and Rebbe Lezer Buchod, who the Sfir Leach Yavel Rabban Flugle, Mishok, Afikle, Ba'atsof. Right. So Rif is saying, yes, it's true. The Gemara assumes that in our mission, it's Rabbi Lezer that holds, that it starts from the time the Kohanim go to eat their truma. But that's not to say that Rabbi Lezer is the only one who holds that way. It's Rabbi Lezer and the Chachamim. What's the proof? Because the Chachamim, the sages, only argued on him vis-a-vis when the obligation ends. According to Rabbi Lezer, if you didn't say Kriyat Shema at night, within the first third of the night, you missed the obligation. And the rabbis argued and said, no, you haven't told midnight. Hey, if the rabbis also hold that the obligation starts at a different time than Rabbi Lezer, the Torah also argued with him vis-a-vis when the obligation starts. And they didn't argue with him vis-a-vis that. They only argued on him vis-a-vis where the obligation ends. So you see that Rabbi Lezer and Rabbanan and the sages, they all held the same opinion vis-a-vis the start time. Because if they would hold otherwise, they should have argued on him as far as the start time, just like they argued on him vis-a-vis the end time of the obligation. But see, since they didn't argue with him vis-a-vis the start time, so the start time is Rabbi Lezer and everyone else. Right? And then the only machlokas, the only dispute between them was vis-a-vis the end time. Right? Since they only argued on Rabbi Lezer vis-a-vis where the obligation ends, Shamina, so we hear from that. The that be it Rabbi Lezer, be it the Rabbanan, the rabbis, everyone agrees, everyone holds that the obligation to start saying Shema night is from the time the Kohanim go in to eat their truma, which is when the stars come out. Right? All right, so so now since it's only because Rabbi Lezer and the Rabbanan clearly agreed on the start time, and Rabbi Lezer said a different start time in that brisa, that brisa recorded Rabbi Lezer as having said a different start time of the obligation. So yes, there's a contradiction Rabbi Lezer, but vis-a-vis the start time of when the Kohanim go in, the rabbis held that both the rabbis and Rabbi Lezer agreed on that. And then Rabbi Lezer was recorded saying something different. So we ask, indeed, a contradiction, Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Lezer. But that's not, that does not in any way negate that the majority of the rabbis agreed with the start time of, when the Kohanim go in to eat their truma, which is when the stars emerge. Just Rabbi Lezer, who seemingly held like the rabbis, seemingly said something else in the brisa. So we ask, contradiction, Rabbi Lezer. But the principle of that the multitude of rabbis, the majority of rabbis hold that the start times when the Kohanim go in to eat their truma, which is Seisa Kochavim, that still stands. And that's why that remains the halacha. Lach Piruka, so now the Gemara then answered, to resolve this contradiction of Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Lezer. This is an example of where the Gemara just went into side argumentation to clarify, just clarify this contradiction of Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Lezer, even though it didn't affect the halacha. The halacha is like the majority of rabbis who seemingly in accordance with Rabbi Lezer in one of the sources, but nonetheless it's the opinion of the majority of rabbis that the obligation starts when the Kohanim go to eat their truma, which is when it starts come out. So here, Trader Rabbi Lezer, right? So we answered the contradiction to that there were two different latter-day Tanoim. Each one heard something else in the name of Rabbi Lezer. So there is it's not exactly a contradiction so much as one guy said, "Oh, I heard Rabbi Lezer holds like the majority of rabbis that the obligation starts when the Kohanim go to eat their truma. Another guy said, no, I heard Rabbi Eliezer said something totally different. That starts from the time that you have to abstain from malacha, from prohibited activity on Friday evening, Friday at sunset. All right, so that was the first answer, but no one disputes the principle that this idea that the start time is of saying Shema at night is when the Kohanim go in to eat their truma, that the Chachamim held that way also, which makes it halacha regardless of what Rabbi Eliezer himself really holds, right? But the Rif says it goes even more than that. The Gemara says a second answer, second attempt to reconcile this seeming contradiction between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Eliezer, just between himself. The fact that the time of when the Kohanim go to eat their truma is the opinion of the Rabbanan, of the Chacham. That was never in dispute, right? But according to what the Gemara says, a second answer to resolve the contradiction, the inner contradiction of Rabbi Eliezer against another thing said in his name, right? I'm reading by Sefer Illustration of Rabbi Eliezer, Brir Musa, Shachar Chazak, Joseph, Rabban Bechudu, V'lav Rabbi Eliezer. So Gemara says, you know what? Rabbi Eliezer opinion, to another attempt to resolve the country is to say something even further reaching, right? You know what? That the Kohanim going into eat their truma was not Rabbi Eliezer. That was only the Rabbanan. Rabbi Eliezer himself holds the obligation begins when you have to abstain from malacha Friday evening, right? So according to that second way of resolving, it makes the case even stronger that the opening phrase of the Mishnah, when does the obligation start? From the time the Kohanim go in to eat their truma, that was said purely according to the Chachamim, the majority of rabbis, right? It was the opinion of, and it wasn't even the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer at all. Only the opinion of the majority, but still the opinion of the majority, right? The opinion of the many, right? And so according to that second way, then for sure, right? The beginning of the Mishnah is the opinion of the Chachamim. Rabbi Eliezer, he may have disagreed with that opinion, just like he disagrees as to how long the obligation lasts. So according to the second way of learning, right, Brir Milsa, it's very clear that the opinion of when the Kohanim go in to eat their truma is solely the opinion of the Rabbanan, the majority. The law of Rabbi Eliezer, and it's not the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Hilkach, and therefore, says the Rif, he sums up, Ben lepruka kama, Ben lepruka basa, be it according to the first answer, that there were two different opinions, two different records, what Rabbi Eliezer said, but even according to that first answer, right, that there are two different records, at the beginning of our mission is also Rabbi Eliezer, not Rabbi Eliezer, to the exclusion that the majority of rabbis hold that way also, that the obligation starts when the Kohanim go and eat their truma, and be it according to the second answer, right, that the beginning of the mission is the Rabbanan, right, Mamish. It is the Rabbi Eliezer indeed argued on them both on when the obligation starts, when the obligation ends, but the opening statement of the Mishnah is the opinion of the Rabbanan, right, of that the obligation starts when the Kohanim go and eat their truma, which is when the stars come out. So right, so with that which it says in the Mishnah, the obligation starts from the time the Kohanim go to eat their truma. That is according to the Rabbanan, the majority of rabbis, and since it's according to the Rabbanan, who are the many, we do like them, and that is how the Rif askin halacha lema'aseh, right? That we must do that. So if you're going to daven Marav early, and you're allowed to daven Marav early, that's a Gemara in the fourth parak of Brachos. The Rif will bring it, right? You must repeat Shema after Tzesa Kocham. That's normative halacha. To be honest, the Rosh does bring from the Bali Atosus that you could also fulfill the Shema, the obligation of the night Shema if you said it earlier. Just there's a difference between the Bali Atosus themselves. Whether you could even from any time after Plaga Mincha or during this time of Bein Hashmashos, but the normative halacha, the opinion of the Rif, and which is the opinion of the Rambam, which we try to fulfill, even Ashkenazim who follow, who rely on Tosas. We try to fulfill the Rambam and the Rambam and the Rif, that rule that the starting time of the Shema is at when the Kohanim go to eat their truma, which is stars, when stars come out. Whenever we daven Mariv early, be it in the summer months, or be it one of those minyanim that do Mincha Mariv back to back, with now no break between or very minimal break between, we repeat the Shema again after the stars come out. Look at that. Easy. We didn't rush any words. We didn't have to shave, and skimp on any explanation to make the time limit. We did a whole daf really in 20 minutes. Rif is the way to go. Subscribe to the channel so you'll always be notified when there'll be a new installment of Rif. Right, so and that way you won't miss it, and you will really know the essential material that Ravina and Ravashi, who collated the Talmud, wanted you to know. Take care, everyone. Stick with the program.